Hello, my name is Lori Gonzalez, and I'll be talking to you today about Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. The objectives I will cover today between the health policy priorities are to protect and promote all patients' health, present difficult legal, ethical, and social questions, and groups aiming at settling important issues. The health policy formulation. In order for you to have a health policy making process, you have to understand the policy making process is the first step. The second step is having the first phase in formulation. The second phase is implementation, and the third phase of evaluation phase/modification. Again, health policy formulation are stages of the policy making process that happen after political activities that ensures a policy issue arrives in the policy action agenda. This policy making can take place in an open and public system involving a big amount of members to a closed system of just a few members. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act ensures that the majority of Americans have the option to have quality and affordable health care. In order to have such measures, and transformation within the health care system is necessary to contain cost. Addressing important key subjects such as quality and affordability in health care for all Americans, public programs' role of helping, having quality and efficiency of health care continued improvements, and preventions ensured to avoid chronic diseases in the future and improve the overall health for the public. Legislative branch is represented by the House of Representatives and the Senate. Collects information from a variety of objective sources, is publicly accountable and impartial, and has deliberate engagement. Federal law. Federal law affects the health policy formulation by the three branches of government known as the executive, legislation, and judicial. In the executive, as chief executive, the president executes the provision of federal laws. The oath of office instructs the president to carry out the laws of the land, including the federal laws, the issues that affect the entire country with foreign affairs or national security, interstate commerce in regards to television, any internet or transportation, the conduct that occurs on federally owned property or concerns federal employees, for example, military bases or post offices, and the federal crimes specified in the Constitution, which, for example, is treason, piracy, counterfeiting. Relation to the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act and health policy. For the patients, they believe the acts are in effect by taking away insurance restrictions on individuals with any pre-existing conditions, plus allowing children to be covered under their parents' insurance plan until the age of 26, due to most of these children, as you know, are in college straight after high school, and majority of them continue on for bachelor's, master's, and doctorates. Another concern about the patients is impacting medical care of doctors and paychecks, and because the reforms are not clear, the continued changes being made by the healthcare reform will be a challenge. For physicians, believe the disconnection amongst the American Medical Association, where the laws and its basis are supported by stakeholders. Many feel the system is unfair and payout is not enough to help them take care of their patients and or overhead costs to run their practice, which many tend to retire, work part-time, stop accepting new patients, or work in conjunction with other group clinics or hospitals-based facilities to keep abroad. Need is more for accountable care organization and the shortage of the primary care providers, and have less office visits, diagnostics, and have less drug. For the employers, they believe reform laws tax credit for small business was encouraging companies to have less than 25 employees to offer insurance benefits. If employers would have less than 25, they weren't allowed or mandated to have insurance for their employees. Insurers, with the new reform, have a better position to reap financial gains as the law increases more members and provides a better market strategy. For example, 16 million new enrollees will join Medicaid according to the future prediction of how PPACA is going. And the hospitals. Reduction in federal reimbursement revenues went down along with patient volume, plus patient depths went up and costs increased because more Medicaid patients were seen in the emergency care department due to lack of primary care providers. A lot of times you would see Medicaid patients trying to get into their primary care doctor, their primary doctor, family doctor, and the visit was, if they were sick today, their appointment wasn't until set till 2-3 weeks from now. So this was the reason why there was so much increase in the hospital setting for these Medicaid patients. As far as the hospitals, layoffs and reductions in cost and increases in efficiencies for hospitals also impacted these hospitals. Not being able to afford all the employees, the hospitals had to come down. So because of that, the layoffs and the reductions in the cost increased in their efficiencies. Another thing the hospitals decided to do was merging of hospitals to stay afloat in business, and doctors looking forward for the increase in new patients expected to have health care in the future. The impacts. Federal tax changes and state revenue impacts, as PPACA will require different taxes and penalties that may impact individuals and businesses. And I'm sorry, PPACA is the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. The state employee and retirement benefits, which is the federal Medicare. It impacts. How did these three players affect policy formulation? The legislative, represented by the House of Representatives and the Senate, impartial and publicly accountable, collects information from broad objective sources. The executive's ability to veto or reject a proposal of the law, appoints members of government agencies, issues executive orders, and the ability to access difficult health, science, and policy questions through research institutions. The judicial powers is the Supreme Court. Political figures appoint the judges. Evidence is collected impartially and objective. The highest level of decision makers is the judicial powers. How did these three players affect implementation and modification? The legislative power to make laws. They have ideas that become bills, and the research done by Congress members. Input from organizations are allowed into these bills, and bills need to pass both chambers of the Senate and the House Representatives. In the executive, does not hold hearings such as other branches. The president uses his own agencies to retrieve information and has the ability to have experts from the agencies give details of written and voice comments. Objective and accountable. Ability to have information, evidence, and data to conclude the best health policy the president suits best. And in the judicial powers, the courts make many hard decisions and don't always have all parties involved very happy. They also have the rights on reproductive, the rights to cut off lifeline, and the mental health are three policies the judicial branch was successful in passing during the 1970s. Throughout the years, laws have changed, and different states fought to not change what their state mission or ideas for their state were suited best. The legislative process affecting healthcare and healthcare professionals. In the House committee sets the tone for what is right in this committee. The Way and Means Committee, which is the Medicare Part A, which covers like office visits, and the Energy and Commerce, which is Medicare Part B, which is more covers hospital coverage and Medicaid. In the Senate committee, the Appropriations Committee, Finance and Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committees. All affect healthcare and healthcare professionals. In the executive process, presidents can put health policies in a direction he feels is best and can change leadership if need be. The state health department, the state mental health department, the state Medicaid office, the state offices of facilities of regulation, licensing, and others, the education department from the states. For example, the Supreme Court upheld the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act on June 28, 2012 by the Supreme Court Judge Vinson to tax and out mandate, which in turn declared it constitutional. The impact of termination. In legislative, prior to 1934, there was no statutory restriction on the lobbying activists of charities. The executive, has, on corruption, not being productive, accepting immigrants of any kind from a foreign state without the consent of the Congress. The example I gave was I heard on Trump, for our current President Trump on February 27th and on March 6, 2017, the Chinese government granted approval of 38 new trademarks to Donald Trump and his companies, and the director of Hong Kong stated so many applications were approved so quickly by Donald Trump, whereas Trump did not obtain the consent from the Congress like he should have. In the judicial powers, the Constitution provides for the impeachment of members of the Supreme Court. As per judges or lower courts, Congress has the power to prescribe the procedure and the cause for the removal. Congress may also validly provide for the process of determining the incapability of a judge to discharge the duties of his office, and these all have impacts of termination for each branch. Leading project failures. If it's regarding timing, which is schedule related, attributes it's planned schedule management, unrealistic durations, delays in work approvals, schedule pressure, inability to consider ramp up time, the budget cost, the scope, the project management team, the contract related, the planning attributes, stakeholder engagement, risk mitigations, communication related, technology readiness, and contractor related, to name a few. And in conclusion,